You're listening to Second Cut. This is the podcast from the film magazine, except not anymore. I just said that on Reflex, where we talk about topics in film history, theory, criticism, etc. I'm Jacob, and I'm the one with a scorpion friend on my hand.
I'm Sam. I'm the one who is shaken, not stirred.
I'm Kieran. I am the one who, frankly, is the best because realistically, nobody does it better.
Yes, and we are talking about the James Bond movies, because
Hence the reason we are dressed up.
yes, yeah, you should watch the video for this one if you only listen to audio, because we look fancy.
Obviously, we will never be this fancy again.
Yes. So, guys, why are we talking about James Bond? Did something happen recently? I don't know.
Yeah, there was a disastrous montage at the Oscars. But aside from that,
A lot of people died this year. You're right.
yeah,
We're talking
and
about
half of them
this
weren't
because-
mentioned.
We're talking about this because Amazon have finally taken the plunge and taken full creative control of the film franchise. Previously, because they owned MGM, they essentially owned the Bond back catalogue, but it was still the Broccoli family who were kind of steering the ship, as it were. But no longer. They've sold up and stepped back, and now it's down to Bezos and his empire to churn out many Bond content things over the coming years, I'm sure.
The Bond CU, yeah. Finally,
Bond
we will get to see.
Rings of Power.
Yeah, finally we will get to see the exploits of 002 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 and all of their offspring and the adventures of Eve Moneypenny and all of that stuff that actually nobody cares about, because when you go and see a James Bond movie, you go to see James Bond and that's it. That's why you turned up.
Yeah. The identity of James Bond is very confusing, because some people say it's just a code word. Some people think it actually is a person just being kind of recast by Batman or like Batman. I mean, what is James Bond in film?
Well,
And Kieran,
I mean,
if you
I
want to
think
talk
that-
about the books, talk about the books.
I've read two and a bit.
He might not be the only one, because I've got this.
How many is in there?
2, 4, 6, 10. So I think all but 2 of them.
Yeah, because I've got
possibly.
the father has got 6 of them in a hardback, and I've got 2 in paperback. Hilariously enough, what it doesn't have are out of 8, and bear in mind there's 12 novels and I think 8 short stories or something along those lines. What I don't have with the 8 novels, so coming on half of them, I don't have the ones that would be relevant to the films that we're going to be specifically touching upon. I don't have The Spy Who Loved Me and...
I do have Casino Royale and You Only Live Twice. I don't have The Spy Who Loved Me. So.
Yeah, although apparently The Spy Who Loved Me is like really weird because it's set from like a woman's perspective, and James Bond comes in like 2/3 of the way through, and it's almost kind of like somebody's brief encounter with a spy.
And of these, I've only read Casino Royale. I read the first chapter of You Only Live Twice about half an hour ago, just to see how it started. It starts with Bond patronising Japanese people. Sure.
It's like I've read Casino Royale a couple of years ago. I read Diamonds Are Forever over Christmas just by accident, and I've read the first sort of 40-50 pages of Dr. No, which is the first one in this, which doesn't have as much patronising because Honey Rider hasn't turned up yet. So I'm sure if you did,
and weirdly, the first Bond film is the 6th Bond book.
Yeah, there was a reason for that at some point. I just can't remember which one. I think they kind of looked at all of them and went, Dr. No is actually a half decent starting point. There's probably some budget reasons as well for going with that one first. As for kind of his identity, things like that, is the name James Bond actually just a code name? Not according to Skyfall. Which actually does give him an ancestral home and some parents and things like that, with the surname Bond as well. So. But then,
we might come to it. But apparently, they created the character of Kincaid with the view to casting Sean Connery in the role if he'd have said yes. But
he said no
because he said no. It's like, all right, we'll just make him the groundskeeper and just give Albert Finney some work.
you're always going to give Albert Finney some work, aren't you? I mean, let's be honest.
Yeah, but in theory, at least the first run of films, so say Connery into the Moors, they're meant to be the same character because they kind of reference like their history, dialogue stuff, So,
and most of the people that play kind of Q and M and Moneypenny are the same. It's only when you get sort of later on that they start having to do stuff and change things up, and then it becomes kind of just different iterations. A bit like a Sherlock Holmes kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean Desmond Llewellyn as Q kind of lasted right up till Goldeneye, didn't it? That was his like retirement film, and then John Cleese came to replace him
for a couple of movies, and then you get Ben Whishaw eventually. Yeah, and it's quite funny. I re-listened to The Rest Is History did a James Bond episode for the release of No Time to Die, and because Dominic Sandbrook has written quite a bit on James Bond as a kind of modern historian of British kind of cultural stuff, along with all the political stuff, and he's kind of going on about Ian Fleming as a person, because obviously a lot of the Bond films reflect on the writer. As much as you can separate the two, there is always going to be some kind of crossover. And he's going, like Ian Fleming essentially, well, put it this way, to start with, he was the son of a Tory MP. Which, Jacob, that's probably like, I'm not sure how right-wing his father was, but the equivalent would be like having, Jacob, somebody, son of a Republican politician, writing a load of spy novels.
Sure. For Americans,
period.
That's like if Sarah Palin's child started writing about...
There's going to be some skewed political and kind of ideological things one way, which are always going to happen.
Ian Fleming, obviously, he did work in naval intelligence, but it was very much a desk-bound job. So I think a lot of people I've seen Bond as like his kind of wish fulfillment fantasy. So this is what I wish I was doing.
Well, the thing is, like, apparently he was kind of useless at pretty much everything. He wasn't a great academic. He got sent to like kind of army training kind of school, college thing, and wasn't great there. They sent him to kind of naval intelligence, wasn't the greatest. Whereas his father has been a Tory politician, I think died in the war as well. So kind of Fleming always had like a photo of him as a kind of idealistic person to live up to. His brother Peter Fleming as well did like loads of adventures. Did you see, is it The Lost City of Zed? There was a film that came out about coming on 10 years ago. Well, like Peter Fleming went on an adventure to find somebody who had tried to find that and had gone missing. So Peter Fleming was like a around the world adventurer kind of thing.
So when people talk about Ian Fleming like being brought in to create crazy plans for World War II, it's more because he was related to a politician and less that he was a spy novelist.
I mean, I think Ian Fleming was involved at a certain point in terms of creating the crazy plans. That's more Dennis Wheatley.
No, he was part of the intelligence part of kind of the Navy. And he attended rank commander, I think, like Bond does in the book. So but actually, it wasn't like an action hero kind of role. He wasn't on the front line. He was very much kind of going through kind of data, and trying to decipher codes and things like that. In contrast, his distant cousin Christopher Lee was doing the action part of that role, and it's rumored that at least an aspect of Bond was based on Christopher Lee. His willingness to kill, definitely. I mean, he's literally the license to kill during the war.
Knowing what it sounds like to get stabbed in the back, kind of thing. So there's a theory that Bond is kind of a combination of that and his friend. He was friends with David Niven as well, who I think that's the one that plays him in Never Say Never Again, Casino Royale.
In the spoof Casino Royale, from the mid-70s, mid-60s even,
67, wasn't it? Because it came out the same year as You only live twice as well. So there's weird stuff as well. But then even like he goes to his because he's fairly wealthy, he goes and he's got a place out in the far countries, which amazingly enough is called Goldeneye. Hence the only reason that film is called Goldeneye.
Yeah. It was in Jamaica, wasn't it? I think.
Yeah.
It was like his
holiday home.
His island paradise, essentially, where he wrote all the novels.
And so he decides, he's there and he's 41, 42 and goes, I'm going to try my hand at writing a novel because I've not been incredibly great at pretty much everything else. And he sends it off, and like the first lot of publishers, or a couple of them, went, we don't want this. It was only kind of his brother essentially giving them a nudge, going, I have money and wealth and fame and connections, please print my brother's novel, that it got the first one. And it wasn't an amazing runaway success the first time. It kind of built up over the sort of 6 or 7 that went on. And by sort of 57, 58, it kind of got there, which is why when sort of Hitchcock does North by Northwest in 59, everyone comes to him and goes, we're thinking of doing these James Bond novels that are finally starting to catch the public imagination, because you need quite a few to do it.
And the first idea was if it was like a serialized TV show or a more Americanized film starring American spy Jimmy Bond was the original concept.
Jimmy Bond, Well, the thing is,
have y'all seen the 54 Casino Royale?
No, I have yet to see it. Is it any good?
I haven't seen it.
It was on it was an episode of the CBS television Climax, which is an anthology series. Which it seems like the 50s, the US loved anthology series. What was it? X-Files, Climax, Voyage to the Unknown, Alfred Hitchcock Presents. Like that was the time for like a kind of genre short story TV show. That was the thing. It doesn't happen now aside from Black Mirror, really. It's the only one that's done it. But so you got all these things, and then you start printing them out. And it's interesting because people have gone sort of now in retrospect, oh, this is an outdated time, it's chauvinist, it's misogynistic, that kind of thing. And yes, it is to a certain extent. And I mean, he was born in 1908. He was part of like Churchill's war kind of thing. His father was a Tory MP. He was there at kind of the collapse, kind of the falling of the British kind of empire, as it were. So there's going to be some stuff in there. I'm not, justifying it the whole way, but that stuff is kind of going to be in there as part of his person.
Connery's is pretty bad on that front.
But the idea that nobody thought it was like outdated is ridiculous. I'm trying. So there were people that went sort of it's amazing and sort of really well done, but I can't find it. There was somebody somewhere that went kind of, this is the worst book I've ever read. It's the nastiest book I've ever read. It's just full of thuggish brutality and sexism, and that's about it. And this was at the time of release. So the idea that kind of it's only once you get to the sort of 80s and 90s people are going, oh, how dare they, is absolutely not true. It was on the borderline even back then.
And Fleming passionately wanted kind of his creation to be in something kind of a good kind of film or TV version. I mean, the American TV kind of take on it, really disheartens him, and he was really reluctant, to kind of go in for that again unless he knew it was going to be done right. Yeah. And luckily, you get Albert Cubby Broccoli and Harry Saltzman, forming Eon Productions, and essentially agreeing to do serious kind of expensive, prestigious kind of adaptations of the books, from 62 onwards. So.
Yeah,
and he got to at least see 3 of them come out, before he died fairly young.
Yeah, he died. What did he die? 56, which isn't old. Died August 1964. So did he see Goldfinger come out?
I believe. Yeah, I believe he saw the first 3.
Which he named after an industrialist. an industrialist architect, apparently, who he absolutely despised the architecture of, and the guy Goldfinger threatened to sue him to change the name, and apparently Fleming turned around and went, "If you want me to change the name, I'll be changing it to Gold Prick." So it's just like, okay, no, you can have Goldfinger. It's like, I'll change it. I will make it worse if you want. Goldfinger was the first one to win an Oscar for Best Sound Editing. And it kind of is a prototypical blockbuster. I mean, Casino Royale and Diamonds Are no, From Russia with Love is the second one, isn't it? Kind of have bits in there. But kind of Goldfinger is the one that has the big budget. So for the time, it was 3 million, which is probably going to be 30, 40 million by today's standards at least. So it's one of the first ones with a decent kind of backing behind it. It's the first one really to have kind of the conferences of come in 007, and Eve Moneypenny and the whole lot, rather than just being randomly sent on a mission. So it kind of goes and does bring in everything and set the template for kind of what goes on. And it is kind of a blockbuster before sort of Jaws, and we get the blockbuster templates and everything kind of spins on from there.
And arguably not only an early blockbuster, but one of the first, obviously, British blockbusters. I mean, I think it's so rare to have a production on that scale, especially one that's not a period drama. At that time.
Yeah, I was going to say, even now, most of if you want, realistically, the Brits don't do many things. It's normally war films, high kind of aristocracy drama, which I'll include royal family stuff in there, kitchen sink stuff, very low independent stuff.
American film.
And that's about it. You've got about those 5, and there's not much else. And most horror film kind of comes into the low budget stuff. Even Hammer goes kind of very low budget as well. So you get all that stuff with Connery taken off. And I don't think Bond would have worked without Connery.
No, and interestingly, Fleming hated him at first when it was first kind of suggested that that Connery was going to get the role. He thought it was completely wrong for it. He said he's not what I envisioned James Bond to look like. I'm looking for Commander Bond and not an overgrown stuntman. So I basically thought he was like too kind of brutish and rough around the edges.
Imagine what he would have thought of Daniel Craig.
Yeah. But apparently he was convinced that first after seeing Dr. No, obviously there were no doubts. He said, "Oh yeah, I was wrong. I was completely right." I mean, on that, a director had basically taken him on kind of almost like lessons in being a gentleman. Took out some nice restaurants, how to eat properly, how to carry yourself, and everything like that. But apparently Fleming also asked his girlfriend of the time, is he sexy? And she said yes. Okay, well, okay. If there's no doubt there, then I need to have sex appeal. So.
That so reminds me of how Johnny Depp got cast in A Nightmare on Elm Street, because he wasn't an actor; he was a musician at the time. I think he was in like the equivalent of smash hits. And it was Wes Craven's daughter, I think it was, or a niece or something like that, just turns to him and just goes sort of like, "Oh, please cast Johnny Depp. He's so dreamy," or something along those lines. And Wes Craven's like, "Okay, I guess we should cast him." And Johnny Depp ends up being Johnny Depp,
Yeah. But you couldn't. I don't think you could have started the franchise with the tone of the Roger Moore films, as enjoyable as they are. You needed to take it seriously first, and then you could kind of. Do a bit more tongue-in-cheek kind of deconstruction a bit as you go, but I think you needed to kind of start out fairly kind of straight-faced and kind of gritty as far as these things go.
Well, I mean, the Roger Moore films, again, Dominic Tambrook points out in their episode of The Rest is History, he goes, essentially kind of the Roger Moore films are kind of Austin Powers before Austin Powers. They're kind of taking the mickey out of themselves before anybody else actually gets there,
Which apparently was Roger Moore's idea, because like the first couple, Live and Let Die and Man Gone Gun, they were still writing him like he was Connery, and
Yeah.
there's a few awkward transitional moments where he's still kind of almost shaking people down, and kind of trying to get the information out of people, through brute force. That's not him. And he kind of said, I'm not Connery. I'm more of a charmer. I'll diffuse the situation with humor, or I'll use my sexual wiles, to get what I want.
Yeah.
That's more me.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen all of them, some more often than others, and then I rewatched all of the more ones aside from Live and Let Die for this, and then I flicked to watching You Only Live Twice, and it's quite funny that you can tell the difference between the two. More of the pun to screen time, or one-liner to screen time ratio goes up dramatically for more near the end of it. It's like that's all he's got. It's just like occasionally it's like, of course I am, and then you have no head for height.
Whereas I think. I think Connery probably you might get 2 in a film, if pushed. But,
like his Bon Appetit line at the end of You Only Live Twice. He's got a few, and then kind of Daniel Craig has 1 or 2 in them, but Roger Moore's is the main one.
I mean, they didn't bother with the first couple of Craigs, did they? But then they introduced them more, obviously, in Skyfall, which is kind of, I suppose, like the more, we'll come to it, but it's like more like this celebration, of the whole franchise. So it's kind of not.
It was the 50-year anniversary, wasn't? It was 50 years. Yeah, so
it's interesting you talk about the Connery films as more serious, because I think the one that you specifically chose, You Only Live Twice, is not the most serious film I've ever
seen. No, especially compared to the others. I mean, it had we can get into it, can't we? But it was troubled for a lot of reasons. There's a bit of tonal whiplash every now and then with this one.
And Connery, I could tell that he is, compared to more serious, but this movie is so outlandish, and I'm like, why is Sean Connery in this, other than I feel like Sean Connery would make himself Japanese.
Yes.
I mean, essentially at this stage, he'd grown a bit tired with the role. He was clashing with the producers more frequently, and he was basically sick of his celebrity status, being mobbed wherever he went. Basically.
Sounds like Harrison Ford.
Yeah. So I mean, I'll get onto it. Have we got any more general points before we get onto our?
I mean, I'm sure we'll be flicking back and forth over Bond and various things, but we should at least start grounding it in an example, especially because this one has the greatest Bond nemesis of all time. The Moriarty to Bond's Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah, we'll come to that. But I mean, just before we do get into it, though, James did ask us a question. His go-to question. It's like, which Muppet would make the best Bond?
What was the actual question?
It's got to be
Muppet would make the best Bond.
It's got to be Kermit, because he's the Muppet protagonist.
He is, but can you imagine Kermit doing any of the Bond action? I mean, he could probably probably want a tuxedo and charm people, I suppose, in his way. But
I was going to say, I'm trying to think of one that might be a bit more kind of suave. I can see Kermit as almost more of a Q character.
Yeah. I mean, I think if there was a Muppet that was good, that probably would be able to kill you, I'd go for Sam the Eagle. It's probably a bit serious. Maybe if he was doing like a Craig era kind of Bond, he couldn't do like the one-liners. But if he was just doing serious, gritty, I'm just going to kill you now.
Yeah, you'd have Gonzo as M probably. Animal as one of the henchmen.
Yeah, Animal as Jaws.
Yeah, that would, or Dave Bautista in Inspector. Who would I have as? I've literally just got a list of Muppets up. Just typed in list of Muppets.
Big Bird.
To go through. Big Bird. Yeah.
Elmo. Elmo as a James Bond would be great.
Possibly. The stupid thing is, although Kermit isn't a decent fit, he might be the best of them.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of good options. They're very goofy, the Muppets.
I mean, Kermit's got main character syndrome.
Kermit can play the straight man, and everybody else can be the other characters around him.
Actually, no. Thinking about it, M would be Sam Eagle.
Actually, yeah, that's probably a better pick, isn't it? Yeah. And Sam Eagle, yeah. I think you'd have to have Miss Piggy as one of the Bond girls who kind of starts off all flirtatious, then ends up going for the kill.
Yeah,
definitely.
What are the other like female Muppets? Because you got to have a Miss Moneypenny in there somewhere.
There's the one in the band, isn't there?
Possibly.
There aren't many.
Yeah. Jim Henson, you sexist individual. No.
I think Zoe from Sesame Street is a child.
It's not as British a thing, I don't think. Yeah. Right. Let's get into some actual James Bondage.
Yeah. So Young Lived Twice from 1967. So this is the final installment of Connery's first run of Bond films. Obviously, he would come back for Diamonds Are Forever and 70, 71, 72, one of those.
71, I think.
And later for the unofficial extra installment, Never Say Never Again, which is fascinating.
Is it a crossover episode?
No, the crossover episode is Spectre and No Time to Die.
Which came about because producer Kevin McClory helped Ian Fleming with his ideas for the which would become Thunderball, and still thought he owned those ideas once Ian Fleming unwisely published them as a book without consulting him. And then as the screenplay came around, he said, right, well, I've got to be involved now or I'm going to sue you all. So he got a producer credit on that, and then essentially owned a lot of the ideas that appeared for the first time in Thunderball, such as Blofeld is named the first time in it. Spectre appears the first time in it.
Yeah.
A lot of like the kind of the franchise kind of cornerstones appeared for the first time in that story, which is why for a long time through the kind of 80s and basically up until Spectre the film, they couldn't use those ideas again, which is why Never Say Never Again just has to be a Thunderball remake, because that's what they own. They definitely own. So
yeah, and it's why which one is it? Is it? It's not View to a Kill. Is it For Your Eyes Only, where they have more with the Blofeld in a wheelchair that they can't name and can't show?
Can't show. Yeah, it's just close enough, but legally you can't prove it was him. But it is him. Bald white cats cackling maniacally, but yeah, may not have been him.
Played by John Hollis and voiced by Peter Marinka. Plays the bald, according to Wiki, plays the bald villain in wheelchair.
Yeah. So yes, so the final installment of Connery's initial runs. This is his fifth outing as James Bond. Basically, the plot is 007 fakes his own death in order to investigate who's interfering with the American space program by stealing their rockets. In order to prevent all-out war between the US and the Soviet Union, who were suspected for the interferences, Bond heads to Japan, where the hostile spacecraft appear to have originated from.
I don't know the plot of this movie, even though I watched it, so thank you for explaining that. But most of what I remember is James Bond does a tourism of Japan in this one.
Pretty much.
That's not far off.
It's an excuse to go there and do some kind of picturesque location shooting, isn't it, really? But the franchise fans for that, is a globe-trotting franchise, isn't it? What kind of locations can we use in this one? And usually this one, basically it's only the one kind of country it goes to. It's all Japan essentially.
For the Anglosphere, it's watch Kurosawa or watch James Bond. You Only Live Twice.
It does amuse me that they turn up at Osaka Castle at one point, and it's exactly the same location where just a couple of years earlier Godzilla was fighting King Kong. It's like, oh, you must have just missed it. And
well, I mean that's That's one of the things about Bond in general, is that a lot of the franchise's history, you can kind of compare that to what's going on in film at the time. Is very much a kind of like them essentially jumping on bandwagons and stealing other people's ideas, which is obviously very apt for a British institution to steal other people's things. So you've probably got stuff like that coming in when you get to 74. With like the Man with the Golden Gun, you've got kind of lots of kind of ninja karate stuff going on, because there's obviously an interest in Asia from people like Bruce Lee, kicking around, who did Enter the Dragon in 73 and did Fist of Fury, was it, in 72? So even Hammer getting on that with Legend of the God of Vampires.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of that, kind of just jumping on the bandwagon, isn't there? I mean, Live and Let Die. There's a stretch of that set in Harlem, and that couldn't be like more blaxploitation if it tried.
It is a complete blaxploitation ripoff, yeah.
And I'd argue Skyfall is jumping on the like Dark Knight bandwagon, where everything is super dark and gritty.
I mean, I actually think the Daniel Craig thing is jumping on a lot of the things, almost like Jason Bourne. The kind of tough, kind of physical action hero, rather than the suave spy, which was very much a Brosnan.
Because I was watching Everything or Nothing last night. Documentary about the whole series, like up to Skyfall. And Barbara Broccoli essentially said, after Die Another Day, they didn't really know what to do with Brosnan's version of Bond in a post 9/11 world. It was basically said that the world had changed after that and didn't really fit in anymore. We were at a bit of a loss, so they had to take a few years off and work out what the franchise could then become. Which I think they went for a complete factory reset, back to basics,
and you have to make him. Essentially make Craig a thug. Essentially,
yes,
he is muscles with sophistication.
I know. I mean, my favorite. I describe him as like basically like a Bond instrument, but like I think my favorite summary of that in Casino Royale was, the chase through the building site early on. You got this guy parkouring everywhere and just slipping through this tiny window, and then Craig just runs straight through the wall. Just like a bull.
It's beautiful, yeah. So I mean, if I'm thinking about it, obviously the most famous one is Moonraker, which is just, they're like, okay, Star Wars happened, let's make them go and have laser fights in space. Like, that's the entire thing.
And You Only Live Twice has space too, but it's super funny space.
Well, I mean, again, You Only Live Twice comes out in 67, which is right at the height of the space race. So the fact it's got this space stuff happening and going on isn't surprising.
But it's the same kind of space action you get in like the 60s Godzilla films, though. It's very cartoony, and just no one really knew what space was like at that point. I mean, I don't think when did Yuri Gagarin go up? I mean, we might have had a man floating around in the atmosphere at that point, but nothing else. So you just make it up, really.
Yeah. The big ship, it opens up, which is going to continue to be a theme of Bond villain vehicles. It opens up and it snaps the cord of the astronaut, who just floats away to his death.
Well, I mean, put it this way. I just double-checked the date. The Earthrise photo, where you get Earth and you get the moon in the bottom half, described by some people, including Galen Rowell, as the most influential environmental photograph ever taken. It is one of the most influential things. That was taken on December 24th, 1968. So we really did not have any idea what space was like, what the moon was like.
Things happen very obviously. The space race between US and Russia obviously escalates out of necessity, and things happen very quickly, didn't they? I mean, a lot happens in like three or 4 years. Just
It's
when was the? I mean, I was going to ask for this. I was going to ask, was anyone really fooled by Bond dying pre-titles? I mean, although apparently I asked that, but it was part of the publicity campaign for this film, because they didn't know if they were going to get Connery back at that point. So they thought, well, better hedge our bets. So they actually leaked that to the press and kind of said, Bond's going to be killed off, and kind of implied it was going to be replaced, and they'd be carrying on the franchise with a different character. But obviously it's like an elaborate ruse. But that's like a plot device we've kind of seen a lot, especially in spy fiction, I'd argue, faking your own death to get the heat off you for a while so you can go do some investigation.
I have a question about that, because is it a plot, or did he just happen to survive an actual plot on his death?
No, because they put all the stuff in place for him to be
get collected.
get collected and all that. So that was all part of the plan.
The gunmen were fake, and the Asian girl that he was sleeping with pretended that she was evil for nobody, for no reason, to have him fake killed.
Yeah, but it's exciting, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't know at what point the fakery kind of comes in and who was in on it.
Because he has real sex with her, and then moments later she fake betrays him just to fool nobody that's watching, because this is in universe happening in real life.
By the way, I think that might be his first line. This might be the worst line in the franchise. Why do Chinese girls taste different from other girls?
Is that you saying worse? No, not worse, just different. I mean, you do realize that the main screenwriter for this eventual version was Roald Dahl.
It's Roald Dahl, yeah.
I was going to say, amazing.
Yeah, it's one of my one of the first things I learned, like going into this. I'd known from childhood that he wrote this script.
Roald Dahl basically took the setting, a couple of the characters, just the very kind of base skeleton, but threw most of the book out and just did his own thing. Apart from that,
that's most of the Bond movies. Yeah. We're going to take a couple of little bits and the name and completely change everything else. I mean, even the bit with the whole volcano lair. They didn't want to do that. They were going to use a kind of seaside kind of castle base, and then they realized that kind of the Japanese don't often build
castles on the coast. Yeah.
So they're like, oh damn, we have to think of something else, which is where you get the volcano lair.
Is this the origin of? Yeah, I was about to ask that. Like, is this the first volcano lair?
I mean, I'd think it would be either be this or be something Japanese and pulpy, like one of the if not Godzilla, one of the cheaper franchises.
I was going to say I would say probably if it's not the first one, it's probably the one that makes it popular. You know, it's probably stupid to imagine that it had not been used before somewhere, but this is the one where it probably comes into its own.
So they fake his death, and kind of plenty of witnesses and a burial at sea. Then after he's woken up and he's got his new mission, they fire him out of a torpedo tube, because of course they do.
Yep.
This is also I didn't realize that he was in the Navy. I learned that in the next movie, but. I thought James Bond just had a Navy uniform that he put on to be in just to look cool on this boat.
Nope. It's a naval commander that gets upgraded.
If you were part of like one of the intelligence agencies, I think traditionally you would have had like a military background. You've been in one of the services usually.
Well, the Secret Service, obviously.
Yeah.
Or if you're Christopher Lee, you've been in 3 different armies.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose this kind of comes to with Craig as well, but I think Connery of the Bond actor is probably the one where you'd have no hesitation in kind of believing that he could kill you quite easily. He really sells down.
I mean, I would. Yeah,
mostly because he was a real life hard man. I mean, he famously he was an infamous scrapper back in Edinburgh. His various kind of labouring jobs and stuff. But even early on in his film career, he disarmed a gangster with a gun on a film set. Lana Turner's kind of jealous gangster boyfriend was convinced they were having an affair, and he turned up to shoot Connery, and Connery just took his gun and punched him in the face and laid him out.
Sean Connery's an actor along with Craig, although after that, probably we're not talking about kind of the 3 lesser. I'm not saying the lesser known Bonds, but let's be honest, there's kind of 2 tiers in Connery, Moore, and Craig now, and then there's Lazenby, Dalton, and Brosnan. I think Timothy Dalton's Bond, because he specifically wanted to go, please make them really darker and gritty, and I want Bond to kind of go essentially screw the rules, screw you, I'm doing what I want. That Bond, if he wouldn't kill you, would have a kind of criminal mastermind vendetta against you.
I think kind of Brosnan and I think Dalton and Craig are the two who you kind of believe they'd kill you, but you also believe they'd probably have a cry about it afterwards. They're very emotional bonds, I think.
So, Sam, who is this Asian guy the Japanese guy that he meets up with?
That was meant to be Toshiro Mifune.
Yes, so are we talking about the industrialist or the cop?
I guess, well, because first he has to...
That sounds like a book in itself. The industrialist and the cop.
He has to go to the sumo wrestling so that we can globetrot, and then give the secret password.
Yeah. I mean, they fill the kind of the film with these kind of well-known in Japan actors. I mean, they were quite big stars at the time, but then they end up dubbing them as well. Because I mean, it's not just Japanese, but it's just basically in this era, British kind of film. Most things were kind of post-recorded. Just everyone was dubbed over. But it does kind of make me shudder a little bit about thinking about the people who were doing the voice recording back in London for these Japanese guys, because they'd have been white guys.
Yep. Oh my god, it's like Breakfast at Tiffany's all over again.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, a lot of it's kind of quite elaborate and kind of reliant on coincidences and just stuff happening in a very precise sequence, which you can never actually predict.
Yeah,
essentially. But
the plot is so confusing, and it's literally plot point.
Yeah, there's lots of like sleeper agents and double agents and people who MI5 think are working for them, but turns out working for Spectre and vice versa. And yeah, it's a lot of that going on. The big guy he fights at one point in that house, that's Dwayne the Rock Johnson's granddad. Nice bit of trivia for you. He was also a wrestler.
Genuinely?
Japanese wrestler. Yeah.
That's pretty sweet.
Yeah. But yeah, and it meets up. There's two Bond girls and there's two Japanese Bond girls who were both very uncomfortable about the scenes where they had to walk around in bikinis, as Bond girls were expected to do. And so he's working with them, and he's working with the head of the Japanese Secret Service as well. Who also runs like a ninja school.
a ninja school and like matchmaking outfit.
Yes.
Yeah. I do like that bit.
We're not saying that Bond movies are realist in any way.
Yeah, I do like that scene where he introduced them to like his ninja school, like they're all doing kind of martial arts practice outside, and then they go inside. Right now, meet some modern ninjas, and they're all just got their guns out and just shooting at targets.
Well, my favorite part of this movie is when he goes, "Step 1, we make you Japanese. Step 2."
Yeah, profit. Yeah, so this is one of the more painful, really just as aged like milk kind of scenes.
I mean, considering the accusations against Roald Dahl and the controversies that have been going around the last few years, this actually isn't surprising.
Yeah, although I've not got far enough into the book to know whether this is in the book as well. I couldn't tell you.
Well, and not only is there that scene, but there's the worst scene, which is the bath scene, where he's like, yes, here in Japan, the men come first.
Whereas, his new Japanese friends, men always come first in Japan. Your English woman would never perform this kind of service.
But then Bond has to say, but I know some who would.
Oh, Miss Moneypenny?
Yeah. But yes, so to help him blend in, because when they've worked out where the rocket's coming from and who's behind it all, they've got to get onto this island disguised as local fishermen, essentially, and for him to do that, that they cut his hair or give him a wig to make his hair look more Japanese. I always remember it as they cut his hair. Then you see like a wig on like a mannequin, so I think he was just wearing a wig. But then they had these like bits of like prosthetics to his eyelids to
give him Asian eyes.
Yeah.
When you're 8, it's amazingly funny. When you're 18 and over, it's dodgy at best.
Yeah.
Well, and Sam, can you tell us about the villain of this movie and his?
Oh, we'll get there, but just a
Okay.
quick couple of things. I find hilarious that they're getting to blend in, but they haven't considered his 6'2" height. I mean, I'm not sure if anyone else in Japan at that point, let's say wrestlers, was 6'2". And later on, when they finally do meet the villain, he gets caught for disguised as an astronaut. He gets Bond gets caught for acting unnaturally or not taking off a piece of his equipment before he gets in his rocket. But he's not caught because he's like half a foot taller than everyone else in the room.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of my other favorite, again, a very silly scene, but very fun scene, is his little the little Nelly kind of gyrocopter versus helicopter fight. So Q brings on his big gadget for the film is this kind of almost like flat pack helicopter, this like mini kind of build your own kind of helicopter, which is ridiculously armed. Despite that, I mean, it's literally it's like a bike with a propeller, but it's got like rockets and machine guns and everything.
Flamethrower, mines.
Yeah, flamethrower. And he's flying around. It looks like a bear on like a little bike, you see in a circus, but he's flying around with these just raining death down on all these full-size helicopters.
I thought he was supposed
Please take
to...
one of our helicopters, Mr. Bond. It's just like, oh no, little Nelly will serve quite well, thank you.
I thought he was supposed to bomb a target, but no, it's just that's one of his weapons. You fly above the other helicopters and bomb it.
Yeah, and it's like a combination of techniques. A combination of techniques, of like miniatures and kind of back projection, and then some really impressive like real aerial photography, which did result in one of the cameramen losing his leg, which was a bit grisly.
Yeah, that does need to be said for this corny action. It's very well made and very well done. Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there are parts of other Bond films where you will have very good stunts, which on their own are amazing, and then they decide to absolutely ruin. I am looking at you, car flip from Man with the Golden Gun, and the slide whistle sound effect. It's absolutely disgusting. Like, why would you do this?
Yeah. So they eventually get to this volcano there. They go up this crater of the size of the volcano and think it's just like a sulfur pool on the top. And then Bond throws a rocket at it. Oh, it bounces like it's made of metal. And then it opens up, and lo and behold, that's where the rockets have been coming from. So they find the kidnapped astronauts, and the bad guys get set up for the next launch. And big reveal: the guys behind it, behind the last few movies, because he's only been an off-screen character at this point, or we've only seen kind of his hands or just heard his voice up to this point. Is Ernst Stavro Blofeld, who, as Kira said, is like the arch nemesis of Bond. He's Moriarty to his Sherlock Holmes. And apparently they had other actor in mind for this originally, but when he arrived on set, he just wasn't impressed enough. So they kind of said, right, which British thespian can we get in this to class it up a bit and just do something really, really kind of camp and over the top, but memorable and threatening at the same time. And they went for Donald Pleasance.
They originally wanted Jan Werich, who was a Czech actor. Who must have been in some stuff for them to know him.
Yeah. So they got in Donald Pleasance, gave him a bald cap, a scar, and a cat, which apparently repeatedly pissed all over him throughout shooting this.
And he also has the piranhas that he drops people into while they leave his office.
And no health and safety in the 60s. You see, no like guardrail on the steps leading up from the piranha tank.
Yeah. And also, they aren't piranhas. They're bubbles in a pond that we're told are piranhas. We do never see like a prop fish.
Yeah.
Why would you need to?
The only animals you actually kind of make use of properly in the Bond films are ones where you are big enough to actually capture on camera and in theory kind of train or control to an extent. So you get your sharks, you get your alligators.
Yeah, they had to wait until the 70s
Rats
to really get that technology.
Yeah.
And then when you get to the 90s and the early 2000s, it's all CGI, and Bond has dodgy history with CGI, it must be said.
Yeah, but Donald Pleasance is only on screen for about 10 minutes, I think, all told, if that. But he really makes an impact. You do remember it.
And yet he got a nomination for lead actor. Crazy.
Well, but I just love kind of his choice of his voice. Kind of very kind of light, kind of almost like sing-song kind of voice he goes for. That favorite line of his, just complete throwaway. Talk out his plan and kind of how they're monitoring everything, and he goes to Bond, "You can watch it all on TV."
Donald Pleasance is amazing, and then he kind of got reduced to like little bit parts and essentially going, "I will do anything you ask me to do for any little money possible." He's a proper British actor in that sense, that he would literally just take any job going. There's only certain people that do that, and he makes this one work. Apparently, he went through like a couple of different things before coming upon the Scar, because obviously everybody's got to have some kind of disfigurement to be a bad guy in a James Bond movie.
Bond staple, yeah.
And he's also very inspirational. You got Dr. Evil and the Inspector Gadget guy.
Yep. I mean, just, is it Mad, the Inspector Gadget guy?
It's just Dr. Claw, isn't it?
There you go.
Yeah, does he run mad?
Yeah, but yeah, just that cliche of the villain, stroking a cat, something like that. I think the couple of years before, I think Goldfinger again was quite influential on kind of movie baddies as well, especially for like a monologuing villain. I mean, I know Blofeld does it as well, but I think kind of putting a hero in like a trap that they will obviously get out of in some regard, just while you can monologue for a little bit, and explain your evil plan.
And obviously Goldfinger giving possibly, aside from James Bond and Shaken Not Stirred, the most iconic line of all time of "Do you expect me to talk? No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die." Which is just like that one scene with that one line and the laser is kind of you kind of know it even if you've never even heard of James Bond. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So just a bit of trivia, the volcano set costs almost as much as Dr. No's entire budget, apparently.
That sounds about right.
And it was so large it could be seen from 3 miles away.
Again, sounds about right.
And that set is the work of Ken Adam, great British production designer who also did the giant submarine hangar in The Spy Who Loved Me 10 years later. Also directed by Lewis Gilbert, same director for those two films. And he also his other big one was the War Room and Dr. Strangelove. So he's got some hits under his belt. I think he was good at just doing that very kind of pulp, kind of exaggerated kind of angles and kind of stuff that looks kind of like it could exist, but it was a bit outlandish as well.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, kind of memorable.
I mean, you mentioned the links between this and Spy Who Loved Me. I mean, we'll come on to the Spy Who Loved Me in a minute, but obviously. If he's done such a strange stuff, that'd probably be why they brought Kubrick on to do some of their lighting first. Spy Who Loved Me, to get it just right, and it all comes together.
Obviously, I've mentioned that the henchman Bond fights is Peter Fanny Miavia, so High Chief. So that's grandfather of Dwayne Johnson. Obviously Connery was getting a bit tired of the franchise at this point. It didn't help the fact that Bernard Lee and Lois Maxwell, so M and Moneypenny, were appearing in the James Bond spoof OK Connery, starring Connery's brother Neil.
Because you would.
Yeah, so that really pissed him off as well. So I think the volcano lair set. So it was built for $1 million in 1967, and that, just for inflation. So this was 2017, so it'll be more than this. But in 2017, that would have cost $17,250,000.
That's coming on Cleopatra levels of
ridiculousness. I mean, I'll say kind of just in general, I think this is kind of a good kind of caps kind of Connery's like first era in the role. I think it does feel like a grand finale that you could take his first 5 films and just see them as like their own self-contained series and just call it there. It works as like a continuous story to an extent.
Yeah, you could put Diamonds Are Forever kind of in the 6 somewhere, in there, and not as the extra kind of.
But that's definitely like a step down in regards to this one in terms of like this got the scale and the obviously the scenery and kind of obviously the very outlandish plot, that kind of makes the most of like Cold War 60s kind of paranoias.
Space
I think
race.
just don't get trying to get put off too much by the regressive attitudes and xenophobia, which, to be fair, if we're going by, we want to do Fleming's words kind of faithfully, they are very appropriate to what he wrote. So
it's not far off. There's some dodgy stuff in some of the books, like very bad. I'll get into one of them that's probably love me in a minute.
I think in You Only Live Twice, a really interesting sort of political image put out is at the beginning you have the one side, the USSR is saying, blah, blah. You have the Americans going, blah, blah. The British are very sensible in the center going, well, gentlemen, I think we can work this out. And then they're like, James Bond, go and murder the volcano villain. Like it projects that the UK is, sort of speaking softly and carrying the big stick, and it's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, when Connery would come back essentially for the paycheck, for Diamonds Are Forever, he's very visibly not really in it anymore. He doesn't really care that much. He just has money and. Talk about like bad things Bond's doing. I think one of the worst things he does in that's one where he chucks the Bond girl out of the hotel window, and I'm not convinced he knew there was a pool below it. That was Plenty O'Toole, I seem to remember. Bond girl.
From Diamonds Are Forever, isn't it?
Yeah. What considered better, I would say, is Never Say Never Again, which he did come back. They went to him not thinking he'd accept it, but he actually was up for return to that one. And that was interesting because that was like a remake of Thunderbolt, sort of again a bit tongue in cheek, not quite a full-on parody, but it's obviously in on the joke. It does take the piss out of a few of the tropes. And it's because it's like an aging Bond. It's like he's retired, and then they call him back in to do like one final mission. So it's an interesting, different take. I mean, I find it interesting they got Darren Craig to do that same thing in Skyfall when he's like in his late 40s. Like, you're not retirement age yet, surely. It's like you were the young whippersnapper only 2 films ago, and now now your knees are shot and you're ready to be retired.
It's going to say you're falling off from hanging onto elevators that are kind of rising up in the air, that kind of thing.
Yeah. But, I think it's a fun one. It's I mean, I'll talk about it again at the end. But for the film magazine a few years ago, I did rank all the Bond films, and I will say all 3 of our films are in my top 10. So this one a lot further down the top 10 than yours, but still in the top 10. So it's fun. It's fun for its time, but I'd say it's a good cap to Connery's kind of tenure as Bond, and responsible for influencing a lot of other similar movies going forward. So
Yep, I'd agree with all the sentiments.
Yep. So 10 years later, new.
Well, we've got a bit for 10 years later. So originally they weren't going to shoot You Only Live Twice after Thunderball. They wanted to do On Her Majesty's Secret Service, but they decided that would take too long to find all the snowy locations, so they shot this. Then Connery doesn't want to come back, so they get George Lazenby, who had done like one acting role previously, I think.
And he basically blags himself into the Eon office and pretended he was an experienced actor, and they just liked his confidence, liked the look of him, and said, "Yeah, sure."
Yeah, this was in terms of film. In fact, this might actually have been his first acting role.
Yeah, because wasn't he a swimwear model before that?
Something like that. It's just ridiculous. Although I will say it in total has one of the best soundtracks in the entire kind of 25 films. It is a gorgeous soundtrack, and the bobsleigh kind of finale is genuinely fun. Then Connery comes back because they're just like, yes, bring Connery back. Lazenby is not the greatest person ever. It's not a bad showing, but it's not incredibly great either as Bond.
You compare it to Connery, aren't you? That's the problem, really. And
Yeah.
He was on a hard for nothing because he doesn't really do anything new with anything his own of his role. He's basically doing a Connery impression.
Yeah. Well, if you think they were trying to make the movie before they did the previous one, then it's going to be there. The Connery's come in, and then Roger Moore comes in and does Live and Let Die, which I've shown it before, but this is my signed version with a thing from Madeline Smith, who is Moore's first Bond girl, the one who is in bed with him at the beginning when M walks in, and they stuff her in a cupboard, and right at the end, just as part of the cold open, he unzips the back of her dress with a magnetic ring or something like that.
Yeah.
And just kind of waves his hand over the zipper at the back of the dress, and it kind of undoes. Which, even if it's not good to say it, is pretty cool idea. I'm just gonna say that. Like, if you're gonna get inventive, like.
Yeah, it's all wish fulfillment, isn't it? To an extent, you know. Just,
I was a bit confused because at the beginning there's also Triple X and her lover, and so I thought that Daniel Craig was maybe the first James Bond without chest hair, but no, Roger Moore also no chest hair. So.
I mean, this is in Spy Who Loved Me, isn't it? Yeah. So you get Live and Let Die, then you get. With Live and Let Die having obviously one of the best theme tunes of the lot, and having Yaphet Kotto of Alien fame, if nothing else, in the lead bad guy role. Then you get The Man with the Golden Gun, which has almost no relation to the plot of the book, The Man with the Golden Gun. And they go and get in.
You do get Christopher Lee finally get to play almost Bond, like dark Bond, essentially.
Well, the trouble is, I remember there's an interview with Christopher Nolan talking about doing the Joker for Dark Knight, and apparently him and Christian Bale had come to an agreement to be very careful because half the time Batman villains are much more interesting than Batman, and then they bring the Joker on and they go, oh crap, what have we done? He's more interesting than Batman. And I think even The Man with the Golden Gun, as good as Roger Moore is, Christopher Lee is much more interesting and does a better performance than Roger Moore. It's insane. And then they take it a few years off, and they come in with The Spy Who Loved Me, which...
because Man with the Golden Gun didn't do very well, did it?
No, and they were both
it wasn't a disaster, but it was nothing compared to the previous kind of Bond films.
Yeah, and they were both again cashing in on stuff that were going on at the time. Live and Let Die was very much cashing on the blaxploitation stuff and suggests that voodoo is a real thing in the James Bond universe. Man with the Golden Gun is very much catching in on the kind of Asia kind of kung fu martial arts stuff that even people like Hammer are cashing in on. You get to The Spy Who Loved Me, and compared to the previous two, The Spy Who Loved Me feels kind of like it is James Bond in a way. I know we've had like 10 previous films, but everything is there in some way. You've got the massive kind of, you've got the gadgets, you've got the cars, you've got the Bond girls, you've got the opening chase, you've got the Union flag, you've got kind of, the big underwater fortress. And
why is this parachute the British flag?
Because it is.
Is it so that they can find him? Like, is there a practical use to it?
It's because he is an upstanding citizen for Britain and Britishness.
It's because though he's a secret agent, he is a bit of a show off as Bond as well. He's wealthy. He wants to kind of tell you exactly who he is at every opportunity and show off about the fact that he's British.
And he's very much a patriot, and it's also so that when he sees it in the cinema, Prince Charles at the time will stand up and applaud with the rest of the cinema. Even though
apparently the flag is wrong on that parachute.
Is it the wrong way around?
One of the crosses is in the wrong way or wrong place.
Excellent.
And it's also so that when we have the 2012 Olympics, we can get the Queen to jump out of a plane with the Union flag parachute as well. Sorry, out of a helicopter. My mistake.
Wait, did she really do that?
No, it was a stunt double. But
okay.
if you go, it's still on YouTube. They did a whole thing for the Olympics where Daniel Craig walks in and gets the Queen to accompany him into a helicopter, and they fly to the Olympic Stadium. This is all pre-filmed, and somebody is obviously a stunt double jumps out, and then it cuts to they've got a helicopter that they timed to fly over the stadium at the same time.
Yeah.
And times people to jump out at the same time to make it look like the Queen is.
It's like what Tom Cruise did for the closing ceremony that just gone.
Yeah, it is well done, but not the person jumping out, but the Queen being in it is actually the Queen. And there is a moment when he's kind of escorted in, he runs past all the corgis and kind of shown into the room, and the Queen's writing there. And he stands there just in silence, waiting for her. She doesn't turn around, and he's just like, and then she eventually turns around and is like, "Good evening, Mr. Bond." And apparently that delay was unscripted. That was just her seeing what she could do, because she was like well known for making practical jokes.
Yeah. And then you get that minute of Dan Craig walking awkwardly, slowly, so he doesn't outpace her down the corridor.
But I mean,
is the Queen a Bond girl? I mean, let's.
Yeah, technically.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what was the year of her coronation? It was 52, wasn't
it? Maybe. Yes. Probably.
I know she was alive during World War II.
It was 53. So, which is the same year as the publication of Casino Royale. It might. Whoa. So it's within months.
Coincidence?
Well, I'm just saying that, like,
I think not.
The Queen will have been like on the throne for maybe a month either side. I don't have the exact date of the publication, but in terms of years, the entire length of James Bond. And so as kind of a symbol of Britishness, and especially when you think of the films, they start in 62, at pretty much the same time that the Beatlemania thing, 64, 65, Beatlemania is at its absolute peak. Like the two are kind of almost side by side in kind of British cultural exports and making the Britain cool again after the downfall of the Empire, and the Queen is very much a part of that. So she'd have probably been like, "Yes, I want to be a Bond girl." Like, she's a young person seeing like the coolness on screen is like, the emblem
and I'm sure,
for her.
And I'm sure a royal must have attended most premieres, of the Bond films over the years,
Well, I mean, like one of the films is on Her Majesty's Secret Service, like. Yeah. Finally, I get to be on my own Secret Service, like, for once, as part of the Olympic ceremony. So all the eyes are on you. I get to be a Bond girl. It's like, and the Queen's just like, "Yes, please, I will do that." Because Danny Boyle's like, "Yeah, directing that was terrifying." It's like, this is not fun.
But be saying like this being like uniquely Bond, I mean, I would say some of the better Bond stories are ones which involve more than one kind of secret agent. Whether it's more double O's or adversarial kind of agents from other superpowers.
Be it kind of Felix Leiter or
kind of or former agents gone bad. End up being his adversaries. I think they're all quite interesting.
It's kind of more interesting when there's a certain thing kind of about the system in which he operates, because that partially turns the focus in on himself.
Yeah, I mean, Barbara Bach in this, she's a really good shout for the role, I think, because I think she gives, it could have been quite a one-note role. I think she gives as good as she gets. She just gets some nice one-liners and kind of got good kind of dynamic with Maura. So.
Yeah, this movie is awesome, by the way.
Yeah. I was going to say, and Bond girls haven't always been the best. I mean, in Man with the Golden Gun before it, you have the reuniting 1 year later Christopher Lee with Britt Eklund. 1 year on from The Wicker Man. Britt Eklund, fair play to her, is not great in The Man with the Golden Gun.
And she spends the last 25 minutes just running around in a bikini, being useless, essentially.
Yeah, and being shoved into the trunk of a car,
Yeah.
And just like giving sarcastic one-liners. It's like, "Are you in the back of the car?" Maybe,
I'll say this, if we weren't also about to talk about the Bond film shot by Roger Deakins, I would say that The Spy Love Me is probably one of the best looking Bond films. It was probably the best looking of the kind of classic era, easily.
Yeah.
I think it just seems like a lot more care and attention seems to be put into like the lighting and the shot construction and even the production design. I think it's all looks great for me.
Yeah, and again, everything's in there, and like I think kind of it is the best of Moore's era.
Yeah,
I will say that kind of
and,
by far
and
and away.
And it's not even close.
No,
I mean, like, there's 2 or 3 Connerys where you could equally argue that's probably his best, and you wouldn't get certain objections. But yeah, this one, there's a lot of more at kind of the same level, and then this just a massive, leap above.
Yeah, the trouble with the others is kind of everything you can take the piss out of to a certain extent. It's like live and let die. It's got the blaxploitation weird stuff and the voodoo crap. Man with the Golden Gun, Britt Eklund is in it.
It's like they either haven't got the tone quite right, or they're not really writing for what he's good at doing as the character, or they're pushing like the comedy kind of too far the other way. But yeah, I think they get the tone just right of this one.
Yeah, and it also has the first confirmed kill by Bond of a female. It's debatable in I think Thunderball, where I can't remember who it is. Kind of somebody's going to shoot him, and he turns the girl towards it, and gets hit. So you can argue
it's a real trolley dilemma there.
Yeah, putting them in the firing line, but in terms of like physically pulling the trigger, this is the first one when he blows up Carolyn Monroe, who I got my coffee signed with again, because I went to see them both last year when they were doing a double call.
I tell you what, Bond's got a thing for, he doesn't like killing women. When he does, he prefers to blow them up.
Yeah, it's certainly a thing.
It never said never again. She literally gets vaporized by his like exploding pen.
Yeah, I mean, the Spy Who Loved Me has pretty much everything. Jaws is in it as well. Is Spy Who Loved Me with the cable car, or is that Moonraker? No, it's Moonraker, isn't it? Yeah.
Moonraker,
Train is Spy Who Loved Me, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. With like one of those ones where he chucks him out the train, and she just comes. It's like, what happened? It's like, oh, he just stopped in for a quick bite. It's like, there we go. There's the line. It does get to a point kind of after this, because there is some of it in the first two, but this really established it where you kind of every time something happens and there's a pause, you just go, what's the pun? And you start working it out ahead of time,
Yeah, so he gets like a load when they're around Luxor, around the pyramids and everything, he gets like a big kind of load of scaffolding claps on Jaws and kind of Egyptian builders.
Yeah.
Which apparently on set he only mouthed because they didn't want to insult like the locals. Though apparently when they had like their premiere in Egypt, it got the biggest laugh from like the Egyptian audiences. So they could probably get away with it.
Beautiful. Yeah, I mean, and then you've got the proper. I mean, we've had a few, and the volcano kind of lair is one of them. But I think Atlantis as a kind of underwater fortress is just beautifully iconic and stupid to a certain extent. Reminds me a bit, and this is going to be a flashback. Do you remember when we did Pokemon the movie 2000?
Yes.
That's what I think of. Like, it's the same concept. I mean, that was a floating airship, wasn't it?
That villain definitely had Bond baddie kind of aspirations, didn't he?
Yeah. And with this, there's definitely takeovers from other bits. So the kind of ski chase at the start feels very similar to the bobsleigh ending for On Her Majesty's Secret Service and all the snowy stuff going on there. The big villain lair with like, well, it's like monorails in You Only Live Twice, and now it's kind of like electromag train kind of shuttles in this. Like, is all there. I want a story about the guy that has to do all the electrics for that, because you've got to build this entire thing. Something like that, or again, the volcano base. Like
that would be a good sitcom, like the labourers and craftsmen who build supervillain lairs, and like
I mean,
who's the contractor for all these guys?
Yeah. Like, you imagine, like, somebody's got to go and draw up the design. Somebody's got to, like, the architect. Somebody's got to, like, filing all the paperwork so that nobody comes around checking everything.
I don't think you
Okay,
need
okay,
permits to build in the
toilets.
middle of the ocean.
Okay, Stromberg. Let me just get this straight. You want an elevator that goes for a shark tank, but you want a hatch at the bottom that we can drop you into the sharks. It's you should design
6 months.
Like, this is the entire series I want to see on a par with like the guy who has to design Minas Tirith. And it's just like, you want the doors how big? Who are you letting in? A bloody dragon? Like, we killed it. Like, it's that kind of thing. But it looks gorgeous, and the action is beautiful. It also, I don't think it has an Aston in this one, but it does have the Lotus,
It's the aquatic lotus. Sorry, the
which is
amphibious
just
lotus.
like it's like I don't care what age you are. It's so cool.
Which apparently caused the lotus to completely sell out for a couple of years in the UK.
As it would do.
By the way, I thought you meant Sean Astin, so I was like, potatoes. But no. Wrong kind of Astin.
This has all got.
Aston
I mean, Moore's era is obviously famous for innuendo as well, and I think this has got two great kind of innuendos, kind of start and end the film. So you got at the start you got M getting Bond back, for a new mission, telling Bond to pull out. Cut to bedroom antics, and then you end with just keeping the British end up, sir.
I was going to say most of the Moore films, and probably one or two of Connery's, normally end with M and Q and some kind of official going to congratulate Bond, who is already eloping with the Bond girl of the movie, and followed by an equivalent of, "Oh, 007."
Yeah, there should be a laugh track at the end of this movie.
Yeah. I also want to give a shout out. Possibly, I think Nobody Does It Better has become my favorite Bond song.
It's definitely up there for me.
Yeah. There's a couple that you just like. You ask kind of like 5 or 6. You're only allowed to keep one, and it's like Live and Let Die. Perhaps Goldfinger, this one, and maybe All the Time in the World, probably now Skyfall as well, and go, you're allowed to keep one, and everyone goes, no, why would you do this to me? This is cruelty.
But also, the 70s soundtrack is really hilarious, though, with like the funk kind of guitar and...
Especially when they're heading into like the final big action scene, and you get these soldiers running down the corridor with their rifles to this kind of slap bass.
Something.
Well, the thing is, all you have to do to keep the same music, and instead of like a soldier running around with a rifle, you put a girl running away from a masked killer in black gloves, and it's just a Jallo at this point. It's exactly the same thing. Yeah. It's the same music.
I mean, basically, this and Young Live Twice have the same action finale, don't they? It's like just a load of extras running around with guns in a big base, and explosions and stuff.
I didn't know James Bond had giant shootout scenes, and then also nuke detonators, and
honestly, they are so impressive in terms of scale for this time period. Those sequences have been an absolute nightmare to shoot. I mean,
all the grenades. I mean, but the silly thing is that, again, supervillain sort of practicalities. They both have their henchmen dress up in red, yellow, or white jumpsuits, and what is that decision and acquisition process like?
Well, considering again he started writing the books in 1953, think of a recent megalomaniac superpower that dresses all their hench people up in strange, very similar outfits. I wonder what this could be a comparison to, especially when you get to something like Moonraker, which the film version focuses on a giant megalomaniac billionaire trying to wipe out the planet in order to establish a new Aryan race, and he's obsessed with rockets. I wonder if there could be a comparison to the modern day somehow.
I've actually got to clarify something Kira said. The megalomaniac isn't giant, but his megalomania is giant. He's not like a kaiju.
I think he's meant to be quite big in the book, sort of 6 foot, sort of.
That goes for a lot of the villains in films, where it doesn't it? They're all outlandish size people, but when it comes to the films, they never works. It's like, these people, this description, we can't cast this.
Just Jaws.
Yeah, I mean, well, the whole thing is, and doing little bits of kind of academia research for this. The main guy that started off seemed to be a guy called Umberto Eco, who's done quite a bit. I'd vaguely heard the term in passing on kind of academic work on popular culture, popular fiction, and that kind of thing. And he established kind of in the kind of late 60s, I think it was, mainly based on the books, kind of a lot of kind of binaries essentially. So it's Bond in relation to the villain, the villain in relation to the girl in relation to M, that kind of thing. And he goes, the whole point was that Bond is meant to be kind of the kind of masculinity that you looked up to, that you wanted to be, and in order to set that off, you had to have the evil masculinity be something kind of physically repulsive in order to set that off and clearly code. You do not want to be this person, you want to be James Bond.
Well, that explains his phallic ship that opens up its tip to accept the submarines, the phallic objects into it. Like, it's the wrong kind of... But it is silly that both of these villains have our ships open up and they take other ships, and then that's my plan.
It is definitely one going off the other. I'm now trying to see if I can actually find.
There's also the old make them nuke each other trick by
which they also use in Thunderball. You know, it's a very common Bond kind of plot device.
I will say that for I was saying I was going to come back that this is pretty much a completely new plot because they literally just take the title "The Spy Who Loved Me" from the book, with something else. There's probably a lot of reasons for that. One, it's kind of an experiment, again, telling a story from a female's point of view that has almost like an encounter with Bond, and this is kind of perhaps partially a thing of kind of Fleming trying to address the kind of misogynistic kind of thing doing. He doesn't quite get it right, though. And by he doesn't quite get it right, I'm going to put a slight warning out for this quote. I'm lifting... Okay, I've Googled it, but this is a quote directly from the book, The Spy Who Loved Me. All women love semi-rape. They love to be taken. It was his sweet brutality against my bruised body that made his act of love so piercingly wonderful. It's not good. Yeah.
It's almost as bad as that line from Casino Royale where he talks about women, essentially he calls all women stupid and unable to function in society without a man helping them. I mean, he wasn't the most enlightened chap in the world, was he?
I'm glad the filmmakers had enough sense to leave that out and turn this into a more feminist film when you compare it to the works of Sean Connery's Bond.
Yeah, I mean, again, sort of, it's not 100% sort of some of them, and sometimes some of them do try to go to something new and do a kind of a switch up. So there is a book that I read a couple of chapters off called this was published in 2015 For His Eyes Only, The Women of James Bond. So it's very much a kind of feminist take on it. And there's a chapter on there focusing on Tiffany Case, who's the character, the Bond girl in Diamonds Are Forever. Chapter by, I'm going to butcher the name, Burl Ulfsdotter. Again, butchering it. Kind of looking at this character and going, you know, she's very much a very competent individual, kind of running a kind of business racket, a diamond thief stealing racket. Yes, she's under kind of other people's working, but she eventually helps Bond get away and these kind of things, and by her knowledge of how trains and mechanics and things work. And her thesis is that when they made that to the film, this is like 15 years later, the world has moved on. And so what they did is because who is it? O'Toole, Plenty O'Toole, I think it is, isn't in the book. So her thing that Boyle Ulfstadter's point was that essentially what they do is they kind of improve Tiffany Case's perception in the film. So she's wearing a suit and trousers, which has only recently become a thing with some of the royals, and is therefore a sign of the modern woman and those kind of things. But they were aware that they'd also done about 6 Bond films, and the Bond girl trope is now becoming a thing. And if you move this character too far away from the Bond girl trope, there now isn't a Bond girl, which they've established as a thing. So her argument is kind of one of the reasons they invented Plenty O'Toole is to kind of give that kind of sexualized element back in there. So and her thing was that you've tried to make Tiffany Case a better character, but also diminish her at the same time, because she now doesn't have one of the roles that she was doing, and now you've got
and she's named Plenty O'Toole also.
Plenty O'Toole. Yeah, aside from the name, it's like you don't want to have too many fancy ideas. Chuck her out of a window, to put her in a place.
Yeah, and apparently there were more scenes planned with Plenty O'Toole, but they were like, now this gets in the way of the main thing, which is with Tiffany Case, which they still want, but we've got rid of that sexual kind of. It's now less sexualized than in the book, so they're like, we need to bring that back in. We're bringing Plenty O'Toole. Oh, now this causes a thing. So, it's although kind of the Bond books had very dodgy stuff in there. Even in the early years of the Bond and the film franchise, they are playing around with how do we navigate these things, because even in the modern Daniel Craig stuff, there is still a hyper masculine fantasy element in there. And I'm going to be one person that says that I don't think that should completely go away, because I think you still, as we move towards a more progressive society, you still need to be aware of having a balance between male and female, almost gendered films, if that makes sense, in order to balance the two. If you make them completely the one way, you're not going to have this balance, and that is going to cause a rise of far right and things like that. It's managing these aspects of the masculine film, if you want to put it like that, which is going to be an interesting thing going forward, and that's probably whole articles and speculations in itself of how you manage those kind of elements that are in Bond from the beginning and to now. But they've always been there, and it's managing those, even at the early days. They are going, how do we actually do this, and try and push things on while still keeping the Bond DNA there, whilst acknowledging the fact that there's some very dodgy stuff in there.
Well,
and I think,
however, oh, sorry.
No, I was just going to say that probably skipping through a lot of stuff. Very famously, when Judi Dench comes in as M, and there's been a lot of stuff written about Judi Dench coming in as M. In GoldenEye, she turns to Bond and says something along the lines of, "You're a sexist, misogynistic dinosaur, a relic of the Cold War," sort of thing. Yeah. So it's not like the Bond franchise doesn't acknowledge that there are faults in it. And one of the interesting things has been the entire time with the shifting politics in the Western world, how it navigates keeping the core kind of extravagant masculine fantasy, if you like it, was trying to incorporate more progressive elements in there. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And I think when we come to Skyfall, there's been a lot of comments on the fact that people think it's actually a slight regression from things like Casino Royale and even Quantum of Solace and the later Brosnan stuff back to early agenda roles. Yeah.
Well, I only watched these three for this. I've seen Quantum of Solace and Casino Royale, but I mean,
I've seen Quantum of Solace many years ago and can't remember much what happened. And as far as I know, just know that Mr. White is a character in there, and that's all you need. Yeah. I can't remember who played him. I can remember nothing.
When you compare Skyfall to the other two, yes, it's obviously improved. And I think looking at it through the lens of, well, how do we adapt Bond to like a more an era where he doesn't sit around going, well, the men's role is to get bathed and to get his massage from a woman, and she makes a drink and she's my wife and I can beat her if I want to, Trebek. There's that Bond, and then there's the more modern Bond where M is played by Judi Dench, and you have apparently Moneypenny as an agent instead of a secretary. So I mean, good.
She becomes a secretary by the end, and this is a whole argument as well that people have.
Yeah, but Skyfall is obviously better, but the direction it kind of goes with Bond is very introspective and like, he's going to become a character now. He's not just not just a guy with a gun who's in the Secret Service and bangs chicks and does all kinds of cool stuff. No, he was a person whose parents died and were buried on their property, and he grew up in a log cabin, and
and I will say that again, the Timothy Dalton films tried to give him more of a depth in some way, of more of an angsty kind of thing with emotions. Which one of the two is it? Where in that version of Felix dies, Sam, and pretty much the entire plot is him getting revenge and going against MI6.
That's License to Kill. That's like Bond goes berserk mode, isn't it?
Yeah, and that is literally just Bond feeling rage for the death of his friend, and he's going to go against pretty much everyone to get pure vengeance, and happens to stumble into big conspiracies and stuff like that. And that's one of the things when I watched them for the first time. I'd seen like 5 or 6 of the Bond movies, and then I got COVID in early 2022, so I'm like, I'm just gonna marathon them all, see what happens. And that's the thing I got from that, is that Timothy Dalton did play it kind of angsty, emotional, kind of, he has a rage inside him that he's not.
Essentially, he's not far off David Tennant's take on Doctor Who, is he?
Yeah, where he kind of can be charming, but can snap.
He almost cares about stuff too much, and basically once that switches flips, then his wrath is terrible, you know.
So it's like they had done it to a certain extent, but when Brosnan came in, and the reason Brosnan came in is that Timothy Dalton was signed on for 3 films. He did the 2, and there was a stall for a couple of years after Living Daylights, License to Kill, whichever one was the second one.
License to Kill, yeah.
Yeah, you've got the box set there in front of you. You can just read off. Essentially, there was a stall. I think there were some legal issues, and Dalton went, I've been out of it essentially so long, I don't want to come back. It doesn't feel right.
Yeah, because obviously United Artists had already gone under at that point, and then MGM was having some problems, and that kind of spiraled. By extension, kind of affected Eon Productions as well. Basically, they're in massive financial dire straits.
Yeah. Which is why
they originally wanted Brosnan when they got Dalton, but then his contract with Remington Steele clashed with that, so you have to wait a few more years.
But it also means that that's why the initial trailer for GoldenEye was, I think it's the word GoldenEye, isn't it? It's spelled out, and then the silhouette comes and shoots out all of the letters to make kind of a 007 appear, and walks forward, and it's Brosnan, and his first line is, "You're expecting somebody else." Yeah, it's like that. That's kind of the switch they pulled, because everyone was expecting it to be Timothy Dalton, and they'd switched it up. But those films, Brosnan is very much more kind of the full-on gadget, suave kind of a mix of Connery and Moore. It's more light-hearted, but it's got the kind of suave, good-looking Connery kind of aspect to it. After that, when they have terrible CGI paragliding down a tidal wave that's been created by a nuke, with bad green screen, they went, okay, we had to do something, and so they essentially went, let's do Daniel Craig, but literally just make him just like, I'm going to punch stuff. Yeah. And that's going to be my thing. And you get that from the bathroom from Casino Royale.
Yeah. I think my favorite aspect of that, the Bond documentary I watched last night, was when it comes to like all the surviving Bonds basically kind of gave their little take on their era and had to ask a few questions different. But Brosnan basically just gets into it, just a fit of giggles that he just can't get out of, which is when he's trying to describe Die Another Day and what they're asking him to do.
And I mean, it's quite funny that also you see kind of changes in the kind of visual aesthetics through it all. You know, the 60s is very much the 60s, 70s, even with Spy Who Loved Me, you get moments, and then going into sort of the later more, where you start to get what I call the GoldenEye look, where it's like everything's kind of flat metallic steel panels.
I don't know if it's a compliment to the Connery ones or a slight to the Moore ones to say they look about the same, just the Moore one looks a little bigger.
I'll be interested.
The black outlines from the green screen in the background isn't as obvious in Moore.
I'll be interested if, like, just I don't know, we're sort of bypassing real obviously to talk about Craig properly, but I'll be interested if the Brosnan era films end up kind of aging a bit better in terms of like their watchability now and their relevance now, because back in, obviously, the Cold War was over, but they had Russian villains, didn't they? And then they had some kind of paranoia
Sean Bean.
paranoia about the power of the press and kind of how you deliver your information and manipulating through propaganda, all that. Themes like that would kind of hits harder now.
Well, I mean, the USSR fell in 1991. And so the first one after that was GoldenEye. So it kind of makes sense that all the kind of Russian stuff comes there. And the thing with Brosnan is the kind of GoldenEye is the one and all the others exist.
Yeah, it's the video game and then the movie and then, the rest.
And then the others kind of exist. But yeah, you get to GoldenEye and that is the epitome of like 90s action, which is essentially when you have a big shootout, it's lots of chrome and like steel panels with lots and lots of sparks. That's it. I invite you to compare the action sequences in this and the look of it to something like Mission Impossible 2, where again it's lots and lots of sparks, and that's our big visual things. It's not so much explosions; it's showering kind of like little balls of light.
Well, the really great thing about Skyfall is it's right in now the middle. But like at this point, it's the most advanced like Bond film. They're in the groove for Daniel Craig by this point.
Yeah.
They brought on Deakins. This is Mendez's first movie, and once again, you just talked about this, but MGM going through some financial troubles at this point. They went into bankruptcy in 2009, came out in 2011, and so Skyfall was able to finally be made with Sam Mendes at the helm, making his first of 2 Bond films.
And I'll say right from the start for Skyfall, there is a switch up from the now usual trend because it is the only Bond film to date which has, and we haven't talked about this, the gun barrel opening. It has it right at the end. And the reason for that is because Sam Mendes knew he wanted his first shot to be Daniel Craig walking towards the camera and pulling his gun out. And he thought if you have that right after James Bond has just shot through a gun barrel, it would be weird.
Yeah, but all the Craig, obviously traditionally it was the first thing you saw before the pre-titles and before the credits. But I think all the Craig films, I think, put it in a different place. I think the only Craig one where it's the first thing you see is No Time to Die, I believe. I think Casino Royale, it's the last thing you see, and then they shift it. They shift it for each film, I think.
Casino Royale because it's the bathroom fight right at the beginning in black and white, isn't it? And then for the final shot, he turns around and shoots which
is the best line delivery in all of Daniel Craig's Bond films. It's like, how did he die? Not well.
I will say that Casino Royale is the second best of Daniel Craig's movie. It's like it would be like peak if Skyfall didn't exist. But I mean, the opening 10 minutes for Skyfall are just peak action. It's so good.
It's really good action. It's really good modern action. So like coming straight off Roger Moore's and watching this, it was like, oh, okay, I'm watching a normal action movie now instead of a 70s action movie. It has the much slicker guitar. It's got we would now think of it as Tenet, but obviously before the kind of background music. It feels better for what I think this stuff should be. However, at the same time, what I don't like about Skyfall coming off of these two is it's too serious. It's way too... And I realize that the stakes of these other 2 Bond films are very big. It's rockets are going to blow up the world. It's nukes are going to blow up the world.
But it also realizes that it's stupid.
Yes, it's...
I mean, this goes for like a very personal story, doesn't it? Literally, the bad guy is out for revenge against one person, and everyone connected to her, So.
It's too personal. It's too serious. I don't care who James Bond's parents are and that he grew up on this rural log cabin farm like Abe Lincoln. I don't care. And
I mean, which was an origin that Ian Fleming added in later after being impressed with Sean Connery. That he was always very English, James Bond. But he said, "Oh no, Connery's good. I'll put in that he had Scottish ancestry. That at least one of his parents was Scottish."
And I mean,
famously, the other one's French.
Famously or not famously, Quentin Tarantino doesn't get on with Skyfall. because it was like the big finales are shoot out in some random house in Scotland, and it's like, this is a James Bond movie. What are you doing? It's like, we're a Spectre. It's a big, massive shootout and explosion fest, a big military kind of bad guys warehouse in the middle of a desert. Like, this is what we're here for.
This is the Last Jedi of Bond movies. This is the one where they're like, we're gonna try and put all this on its head and make it very serious instead of being cartoony. And like, no, James Bond is cartoony. This is too much. Roger Deakins was perfect for this, but his very emotional shadow shots throughout the film are just, they're too heavy for what this franchise is.
Honestly, the fight with the goon against the neon light backdrop is
jellyfish.
It is the best looking action scene that's not in Mad Max Fury Road for me. I think it's just such a gorgeous piece of filmmaking.
Well, the thing is, it is now so iconic that they deliberately based Shang-Chi and the Ten Rings. There is a fight scene deliberately inspired by it. Definitely, and you watch it for the first time and you just think, going, Skyfall, is this a thing? And you know now that whenever there is a
it's even in Shanghai again, isn't it?
Whenever there is a fight, kind of with some neon in the background and they're in silhouette, everyone will think of Skyfall. And to have a random like punch up in the middle of the film, not even your big action scene, do that is impressive. One thing I will say about this being kind of the serious one, Quantum of Solace and Casino Royale, I think, are actually slightly more serious. This is more introspective, but this brings back in kind of the gadgets as much as they are. This brings back in kind of the Aston Martin. This brings back in Moneypenny. This brings back in
with the Aston Martin, it's one of those like, haha, elbowing person next to you, we have to go back.
Oh, but he takes that. He takes the thing off the Aston, and there's just a big side that goes, oh.
Judy, with the same music sting from Goldfinger. Judy Dench saying, "Oh, go on then, ejects me."
And there is some bits in there. I guess because it's more introspective. That it does that, but it does bring a lot of the kind of the stuff back from the earlier films and put it into.
What do you think about Judy? What do you think about Judy being the first person in the Bond franchise to get to drop an F-bomb?
Correct. It's correct to do so.
And that's essentially, you said the plot revolves around one person. It's her. This is an M movie where James Bond is just sort of a human weapon. It's a dysfunctional family drama. That acts out as like a modern action film. It's like stern mummy and her two troubled sons. Because I took my notes at the end instead of the beginning, I have very Freudian Bond throughout the film. Because y'all say mum over there, the way you say ma'am is mom, I guess. So they're calling him mom throughout a lot of the film.
That's the very British posh way of saying it, mom.
Mom is what you meant to say. Is what you meant to say to the Queen, how you address her. But although it's
an authority figure, isn't it?
But really it should be ma'am. It should be, because I've seen this on documentaries. It's like her kind of her courtiers, kind of when people are coming to meet her, they used to advise her saying, so you bow when you first meet her, shake her hand if she offers it to you, and it's ma'am like ham, not ma'am like farm.
Well,
because it's madam with the D out. That's how I was. Whether that's true or not, I don't know.
Then they intentionally made them call her mom specifically because it's super weird. But then I thought, oh yeah, British people say mum, so maybe it's not super weird. But no, it turns out it is. The part, so Javier Bardem, he's the bad guy. He's playing a weird incel. Isn't he supposed to be gay? Former MI6 agent.
Well, he's at least bisexual, isn't he? I don't describe him as, it's like a flamboyant lion.
Yes.
How he kind of stalks around Bond, and kind of tries to make him uncomfortable.
When you compare him to the other two villains, which are iconic with the shark layer and the giant Atlantis cool machine, and Then you have the other dude in a volcano lair who looks like Dr. Evil.
Silver's lair is in like a dead city on a Chinese island, isn't it? I mean, there's something about it.
It's almost a Ozymandias kind of thing with the statue that's collapsed as well.
Yeah.
Javier Bardem feels like, I mean, maybe I'm saying this because he's Hispanic, but he feels like a bad guy in Breaking Bad. Like he just seems too normal and not off his rocker enough, even though obviously he is an insane person. And at the end, this was the part where it really struck home as Freudian, where he has the gun to both their heads and is like, I'm going to kill both of us at the same time. And I'm like, dude, just have sex with her already.
Yeah, because he wants revenge because while he was working for British intelligence in Hong Kong, essentially abandoned him. She traded him for release of other agents. So, and he, and obviously he was tortured quite badly in that. I mean, again, you gotta have a Bond film with some kind of deformity. So yeah, he's a bad cyanide. Bad cyanide incident basically has melted half of his face, and he's got like this bridge work in to kind of keep it level, and then he takes it out at a key point just to show how much he's done to him.
Is it not just that his teeth fell out? Because I didn't get that it was his whole like lower face.
His whole like face kind of sags when he takes that out. So it's like I think like one side of his jaw is just gone. I think
And I'd like to point out, I've just double checked, and in again the same book I was reading from earlier, in the essay by now I can't find the name of it. Obviously, the title of the chapter is "The Female M in the Bond Novels and Films." Right at the end, Craig has stated adamantly she's his mum. Although Bond qualifies this in Quantum of Solace by saying she likes to think she is. So there is definitely some kind of parental role going on, which considering also Craig's Bond's lost his parents, the fact that there would be a parental relationship
like
there is surprising. Yeah. And on the Javier Bardem thing, I think there's the whole thing of setting it in a kind of fallen city or country or whatever is obviously meant to reflect kind of the falling ideals of the British Empire that he believed in have now fallen.
And there's very much that aspect of what is it to be an intelligence agency in the modern world, isn't there? And as those lines about the kind of we're not fighting countries anymore, we're fighting individuals, and
well, though arguably that's what Roger Moore was doing, if not also Connery.
So it's all about sort of looking back and kind of celebrating what the franchise was and like knowing references to its history, but also looking forward, like what does it mean to be a Bond film now? Kind of how can we keep this relevant? And I think that's the way to do it. So you dig further into the workings of him as a character. Yeah, you're right. We didn't need an explanation of his backstory. We didn't need Bond origins, but I think getting when you have an actor of the caliber of Craig, I think he wants to dig into the emotional truth of the character, doesn't he? And
I also think it's interesting that. Sorry, go ahead. Finish off.
No, I was just going to say, and he's obviously spent all of his films doing that. Peeling back the layers more each time.
I was going to say, I think it's interesting that this film is both simultaneously, we said it's kind of about Craig's Bond's kind of origins and therefore personal, but at the same time, in the same discussion, we've also said that it's actually M's story, and therefore Bond is just there. And I think it's interesting that kind of by shifting the focus away from Bond, it's actually made it more about James Bond in some way, because it's about him reassessing where he is in the entire relationship with the structure that he works for, and this obviously then comes to a head in Spectre, where it's kind of facing his arch nemesis is kind of his dark side, where they did grow up together, and then faces his
which was an aspect I hated. I really hated when they do like a new version of established film, and it turns out they were brothers all along.
This is fan fiction, but they decided to shoot it for 200 mil.
Well, with Javier Bardem, because Spectre wasn't out yet. At this point, he kind of feels like a dark Bond since he used to work for them, but another thing that really differentiates him from the other two movies' villains and more aligns him with Bond is he doesn't really have a plan. He's just constantly improvising towards a goal, and that's what the two of them are doing throughout the movie. Is just like, well, you do this, well, I do this, and just going back and forth.
You say he doesn't have a plan, but he planned to have them like open a memory stick so that he could escape through the tunnels and explode a train precisely to hit James Bond that he knew would be coming.
You can understand why at the time he got a lot of comparisons to Heath Ledger's Joker. In terms of, do I look like a guy with a plan? But literally, the string of like remarkable coincidences are just so astronomically difficult to predict.
I would agree with you that once kind of the attack on M at the courthouse fails, he is just, let's just get a bunch of helicopters and some guys with guns, follow this train, and blow the ever-loving crap out of them.
Even at that point, like, your plan was just to blow up the building, like, and I don't think he was even targeting her. I think they said specifically they knew she wouldn't be there or something, so I think he was, other than the train thing, I can't think of a point in this movie where there was a cogent A to B, because like even with Daniel Craig escaping, like he had a plan in there, and he was like, "Hoo, we're going to shoot your girlfriend," doing our famous William Tell trick, and then he's like, "Well, the helicopters are here because I have a radio," which is a funny one-liner.
My favorite one-liner in this isn't even from Bond. It's just the random on the underground, as Bond jumps on the back of the train. He goes, he's keen to get home.
There are a few bits. There's the bit with Q as well, where again giving these kind of knowing nods to the past is sort of the Craig era.
Yeah, he's a great new take on Q, isn't he? I mean, he's
There's the it's the bit where he hands him the stuff and it's like a pistol and a radio. It's like, we're expecting an exploding pen. We don't go in for that now. And then even the others will go more and more into kind of Bond as a franchise and heritage. You get Spectre, where it brings back Blofeld and Spectre and brings all that together. And then you have No Time to Die, where literally Lucifer Satan or whatever his name is, because that's literally his name. Was it Lustrifer Safrin or something like that?
Safin,
I watched it literally today and I can't remember. Lucifer Safin, might as well, as Mark Comer pointed out, to be Lucifer Satan, is essentially just a slightly reworked Dr. No. In as much as kind of the thing where they're making Heracles kind of is pretty much like almost a shot-for-shot remake of the bunker in Dr. No. Might as well be. Where even if they're kind of trying to bring in the idea of a new 00 agent, and yet even Dr. No has the weird things where they bring in a new 00 agent where it's this black female and everything like that. But at the same time, and this is what every time a Bond movie comes out, people are like, it's time to retire James Bond because it's a misogynistic archetype and let's bring in a new strong black woman. It's like, yeah, but the thing is, if you're making it a James Bond movie, James Bond has to be the hero, no matter what you do. So even if you bring in somebody that's immediately undermining him, you then have to undermine them in order to bring James Bond back out on top.
Because even if you did like a spin-off TV series, which was, I think, talked about, around the time of No Time to Die, before we knew what was going on with the franchise. So they talked about like a spin-off with that character. But you'd just be left with, you would have just been left with like episode of as good as she would have been, undoubtedly, and I'm sure we've had some memorable moments. Every moment it'd be like, so when's Bond gonna have a cameo in this series? Then you'd be waiting for that kind of.
And this is the issue that's when it comes out in the next month or two, Ballerina's going to have, because everyone's going to watch that and go, Ana de Armas is amazing, but we're waiting for Keanu Reeves to turn up.
Yeah.
And I will also say, with No Time to Die, Ana de Armas is just an absolute standout. She's in it for like 15 minutes, and it's like, this is why we watch this movie. Like,
best
the first time I saw it again, and it's like, oh, she's so good in this. This is what we want to see.
Well, and also a parallel with, I mean, spoilers, that movie, and also the first one, James Bond dies in this, but he's not dead. There's a lot of grenade throwing. Much like in what's that other one called? All the names are the same to me now. The Spy Who Loved Me.
Yes.
Oh, don't worry. All the names. It's just like there's a kind of a couple of themes. It's the name of like something that appears, a character or a place. There's the name of one of the previous Bond movies, and then there's something along the lines of die or kill or
the villain,
daylight or something along those lines. You know.
But yes. So Bond gets shot clean through the body, falls off a train into a river,
and that's by Moneypenny. She's told take the shot.
Take the bloody shot.
And then at the end, he comes out and he's all spiteful about that, but he also throws a knife into the back of Javier Bardem in the exact same situation, and he redeems himself and shows, women aren't competent. I think, is that the point of that? I don't remember. It might have been that.
Again, this book, I got halfway through this chapter. I was trying to make it sound like I actually knew some stuff about academia, about James Bond, when actually I was just marathoning a lot of James Bond movies again. So, Politics of Representation, Disciplining and Domesticating Miss Moneypenny in Skyfall by Kristen Shaw. That's her chapter. Essentially is arguing that the film starts off with going, ooh, we have a black female character entering James Bond's kind of white hetero field of action, which should be empowering, but this is a threat to the white kind of hetero field of action. So by Moneypenny hitting Bond and therefore getting disciplined after it, this is essentially putting her back in her place. And the thing is, that's their argument, but I would also say that anybody on the street would go, her version of Moneypenny is a badass.
Yeah, but essentially by the end of this, the Secret Service have got rid of their DEI policies, haven't they? And they're resetting everything.
Judi Dench is pulling the ladder up behind her, and quite literally, because by the end, Rafe Fiennes is the new M. And I'm just left with the question: where's the silliness?
Who we always knew because he was called Mallory, so he was always going to be him.
He's also the internal investigation.
If you've got a different name and you're lined up for the position of M, you have to change it.
Yeah. But also,
it was a code name.
I love just random dialogue that it's just there purely to set up something that the character's going to do later on. So he's got like a throw line about his time in Northern Ireland just to justify the bit where he dives over the desk to protect them.
Yeah. Okay.
And there's the bit where they're doing Q and Tanner, isn't it? Doing all this kind of cyber breadcrumbs, and Mallory walks in behind him. Rory Kinnear is not given enough credit.
What an underrated actor he is.
And the new, I'm just going to call it M, walks in behind. It's like, what are you doing? They're like, oh, we're not doing anything. So it's like, oh, you're leaving a false trail of breadcrumbs. Try to take this route. It's much better. Carry on. And he's the guy that was trying to shut the whole thing down earlier. But again, I can see why people have said that this is a kind of a regression, because even that kind of this heteronormative, if you want to say, world of kind of white people going out licensed to kill kind of thing is meant to be a relic of the cold age where everything's done by computers now.
That's an American thing, not a British thing.
I was going to say we were doing that 150 years ago, not 50 years ago. Sorry.
Not 5 days ago.
Okay, yeah, sorry. But the whole thing of kind of it's a new world of computer. Everything can be done by then. You don't need somebody to fire. A shot needs to be taken. That character that was kind of the head of that, of initially leading the kind of breakdown of this, kind of starts to side with Judi Dench and then gets shot at and fires back and realizes, no, this is actually needed. So you're kind of bringing it entrenched back into the world that the franchise you grew and loved and what it represents is always needed. I can see where people are getting that from, even if I don't agree with it.
I can think the problem is that Sam Mendes probably wasn't thinking of it on that level. He was just thinking more of, hey, let's have Monkey Penny be an agent. He didn't even write it, so it's the writers going, hey, let's make Money Penny an agent and explain her origin story, and let's put the dice in the mirror of the Aston Martin so we know why they're there.
It was the same writing team who essentially did all of the Craig films, wasn't it? I think.
I think it's the same writing team that had done them for like a lot of the previous ones as well. So Neil Purvis and Robert Wade are British screenwriters who co-wrote 7 Bond films from 1999's The World Is Not Enough to No Time to Die, as well as other works. So yeah,
it's surprising they've written that many.
Yeah. I think they're 2 big projects. And I'll just check it if it was them or those.
They also did the first 2 Johnny Englishes as well. So they knew exactly what they were doing. I can see where people get it from. Also, at the same time,
they wrote it with John Logan, who was most famous for doing Bond, Gladiator, and Penny Dreadful randomly. So he's got a range
Kieran,
to his career.
With what you're saying about the way this sort of reins it back in, I mean, I think it's just basically being superficially interrogative, and it's mostly about the character itself.
I don't agree with it, but I've seen things in the academics who have tried to argue this case. I mean, like, I am somebody that is both a writer and works kind of on a commercial fiction side of it, albeit in kind of volunteer positions. So I am literally a literary theorist and academic's worst nightmare, because they go into depth about how this represents something, and I turn around and go, no, what happened is we had 100 pages where nothing happened, and I needed to keep the reader interested, so I threw this in just for that. And so I am on that side of it. That's where I work. But I can also see from the literary kind of, or the filmic academic criticism side, why this might be perceived as being the case, even if I don't agree with it.
I don't, I haven't read this essay. I don't think you can go through the entire film and even find like a thesis about what this has to say about women in the Bond, other than like that there are female characters who are not purely like it feels so superficial to me from that perspective that it's not worth really asking what does this do for that. But ultimately I'm just left going, this is supposed to be kind of a dumb action film. Where's the dumb action? Like, there's good action. Roger Deakins is amazing. He's wonderful in everything he does. He's a perfect, pure human, hopefully, and hopefully that won't come back to bite me.
No visual style, silhouettes in everything.
He has a very consistent visual style across many of his films, especially in the 21st century. But
even if he doesn't seem to think so,
but. Like, I just left going, I wish that Javier Bardem was in a volcano and that he had shark men running out to fight Bond and robots and just all the ridiculous stuff, but you just treat the women a little bit better and you don't make Bond turn into an Asian man. And
well, maybe that's where they're heading next. Maybe we'll get the rebirth of the silly Bond.
I think they were saying before Amazon took over that that's probably the direction they were going to go. You can't go completely the wrong way.
For all the wrong reasons. For all the wrong reasons. I did hear that they were thinking of going that direction for the memes, for to be discussed more by younger people online.
Well, you can't go completely that route because that isn't the way of the modern action film, and I mean. No. The Craig movies are, I'm going to say, action blockbusters, whereas even the Moore films were spy thrillers or espionage thrillers with action sequences in.
These are just the blockbuster versions of those.
Well, it is, in just the way that the action is constructed and everything is set out. It is a different philosophy. One is kind of thrills and kind of a couple of shootouts, but...
The old movies feel like Fast and the Furious, whereas this Skyfall feels like you're making Batman as James Bond. Like, that's how it feels to me.
I think probably the equivalent would be that the older ones are sort of Hitchcock thrillers slightly updated, with their set pieces, with the kind of very much an espionage thing, even though James Bond doesn't do that much spying. He's a secret agent, but spying is not his thing.
And he tells everyone who he is.
Yes. 007, James Bond, it's like, you meant to keep my identity a secret here. And he walks...
I'm here to purchase the MacGuffin.
And James Bond, the only person...
It's like Sterling Archer's kind of justification of telling everyone that he's a secret agent. Says, well, if I wasn't going to do that, why would I be one?
Yeah. And what was it? James Bond, the only person in history that can walk into any 5-star hotel in the world, and the person greets him, "Oh, Mr. Bond, your room is ready and waiting for you." He never walks in and goes, "Can you give it an hour? We've still got the cleaners doing it." You know, he's meant to be a secret agent at every hotel. Kind of receptionist knows who he is. But I think the older ones are kind of going on a Hitchcock thing, whereas the Bond, the Daniel Craig era, I think you have to take it in respect to action franchises like Mission Impossible, like Bourne, like even things like the first two Bad Boys, kind of action extravaganzas rather than spy thrillers with action sequences and stunts in them.
So you're saying Will Smith is the next James Bond?
I mean, he still looks like he's 25, so...
I will say I'm very surprised how much his solution is shoot something with a gun. I expected there to be more gadgets and less shoot, gun. Maybe he is an American. Are we sure he's British? I guess he has the giant parachute to let us know.
Yeah, they finally cast a Bond who's English, so... But yeah, and one thing I will say that I still find amazing is that the introduction to the opening sequence to Spectre with that beautiful one-shot tracking shot, which is amazing. The whole kind of parade
for
thing.
the Day of the Dead,
Yeah, the whole Day of the Dead thing, I think I mentioned before, that kind of the scale of that kind of the floats and parade specifically was not a thing before Spectre. They made it up, and they now do it as a result of that. And they didn't think it would work. And then the first year that they did it in the kind of Spectre style, 250,000 people showed up. So they're like, okay, yeah, we can do this. It's being a thing. So thank you, James Bond, for that.
Yeah, and we could very easily do another James Bond episode, even with just these 3 Bonds. So do you have any final thoughts before we shelve him for now? Retire him.
My answer to listener Jacob of how a shotgun shell in the floorboard makes the floor explode.
This is from the Home Alone sequence in Skyfall.
Yes. And again, my answer to that is if that's your problem with the film, it's doing very well.
It's not my only problem. I should say that.
My answer is I have no idea.
It should be like one of those like Jack in the Box springs that shoots up and crashes through the ceiling, and then it can be funny instead of
I think you
dumb.
just meant to understand that pressure on it will somehow like push a trigger and
how does he know how much pressure they're going to put on that one floorboard? I don't know.
I mean, I think also M helps rig some stuff up like that. I do like the glass light bulbs, which is fun.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. That's it for James Bond. Maybe for now. Maybe forever. Who knows? Diamonds are forever. And
yes,
we are not.
It's been shaken, not stirred.
We're very finite. And until our next appearance, which will be next week, guys, where can people find you?
Yes, Second Cut Pod will return in...
Ian Fleming's Second Cut Pod.
Yep.
You can find me at SSP Thinks Film across the internet at our Substack, where I wrote a little news piece about Amazon buying Bond. And back on the Film Magazine, our old home, I did rank 24 at the time, then 25 James Bond films. So that's still up there if you want to check that out. As I say, all 3 of these films are in my top 10. I'm not going to tell you where, but they're in there.
As they should be. And I'm trying to think of a pun for this.
I was going to say, you're Kieran.
I was going to say, I'm trying to think of a pun for it, but I don't, Doctor, know what I'm going to do for it. There we go. But I'm ching. I am K Judgmental in the various places. Substack, I've recently put up a review of Heart Eyes. I'm sure there will be some stuff coming out in the next few days. One of us will be getting on to them.
I am from Proxy for Russia with love, and you can find me at Jacob Film Guy. It's worrying what our democracy is becoming. So watch my stuff. Give us. Well, we don't have a PayPal. Give it to the Film Magazine still. It's up until 2030.
I was going to say, there are some people in the world that own the world already and have decided that no, the world is not enough.
Yes. Yeah, we basically have a bad guy from Tenet situation. So
you've got the bad guy from Moonraker in charge of your country at the moment. Like,
wonderful.
there is no difference.
Is he South African in that movie?
We'll put it this way: he's not American, and he's obsessed with rockets, and he's going to try and kill lots of people to make a brand new Aryan race.
Sure, and he uses his child as a human shield from criticism. And yeah, you can find me at Jacob Film Guy, and you can find us at Second Cut Pod. That's where we do all of our writing and social media stuff. So that is it. Thank you for listening. And how does James Bond say goodbye? Does he have a special way?
Mom.
Never say die.
Yep.
Yeah,
That's Goonies.
sure.
That'll do.